Welcome to a world where people are obsessed with nothing more than watching people beat the stuffing out of the first ugly loser they can find. So not much has changed. First, we are introduced to one of the more normal content creators, Paco, who is currently celebrating his milestone of 700,000 subscribers on YouTube, and with all the clout he has garnered, he has managed to score with one of his classmates, Rumi. She's a guest on his channel, as well as a new YouTuber herself, and she already knows exactly how to gain the favor of the algorithm. Paco asks her about her channel, to which she answers that she mainly does makeup tutorials, but judging based on what she did to the poor soul who offered to be her model, you're better off just doing it yourself in a dark room. Hoban obviously wasn't dumb enough to agree to do something like this, but the threat of getting your face smashed in can be one hell of a motivator. Hoban makes a fool of himself for the camera and tries to force the most unnatural smile I've ever seen, but once he is alone, his real feelings on the matter are revealed. The only reason he puts up with all the abuse is because while Paco is as dumb as a bag of rocks with his channel, he's a rich idiot since he knows how to rake in the cash. Ruby doesn't have as large of a following as he does, but she just needs to flash her jugs on stream once and the donations will start rolling in. On the other hand, Hoban has literally nothing he can leverage. He's not smart, he's not rich, and he's just plain ugly, so the only option for someone like him is to suck it up and accept that he's got nothing. As he returns to the classroom, he gets greeted by a drop kick to the gut from another one of his classmates who is enraged because Hoban's ugly face breaks community guidelines for being too disturbing. This is Snapper, and he's the cameraman for Paco, as well as a member of a delinquent group. However, in a fight, he's an absolute bitch, so one look at Hoban scares him enough to back off for a moment. He looks around the room, and after regaining confidence since he's got friends to back him up, Snapper volunteered to be Paco's cameraman so he could piggyback off his friend's success. And the same goes for Rumi, who managed to gain over 30,000 in revenue over the course of 20 minutes. Those figures have Hoban shocked to his core since he suffers from a condition called chronically broke. He starts thinking it may be time for him to start a YouTube channel as well, but Snapper was also thinking the exact same thing. He goes over to Paco and asks what it would take for him to start a YouTube channel, and as his bro, Paco is willing to help, but he's going to need an adult to help him sign up since minors aren't allowed to receive the revenue. He'll need his parents to let him use their bank account, but that's going to be a problem for him since he's a terrible son and got caught stealing money from them, so they're not on the best of terms. Snapper then comes up with a brilliant idea and walks over to Hoban, who's still laying on the floor. He curtly asks him if his mother is still alive since he knows she's pretty sick. But since she's not exactly using the account right now, he tells Hoban to go steal his dying mother's bank account because he wants to use it. The others laugh at Hoban, and this is a lot of disrespect being thrown his way, which most people wouldn't let that slide. But it's a 3-on-1 right now, so even if he wants to punch them all so bad, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Hoban later goes to the hospital to visit his mother, and she's trying her best to keep a cheery face on for him, but Hoban knows her condition isn't getting much better. His mother notices all the bruises on his face, and she is really worried for the well-being of her son since something is obviously wrong, but Hoban just plays it off and denies ever getting into a fight, just so he doesn't worry his mother. He heads downstairs after seeing his mother has to pay the hospital bill of $30,000. To him, that's a whole week of flipping patties just to pay for her bills. But then other people go and make that much in 20 minutes without even trying. He hates how unfair life is, but he still has some amount of hope left in him because he gets to be close to his crush, Bomi. But with his luck, I won't be surprised if she starts banging Paco for the clout. Bomi asks Hoban if he knows where all the beef patties are, so he points her to the walk-in refrigerator and she thanks him. Hoban isn't the only one who's fawning over Bomi because she's basically the idol of the restaurant, but just getting to look at her makes him happy. Just then, he hears a very familiar voice walk in, and it's the voice of Paco. He doesn't want to be spotted here in case Paco came just to mess with him, but he is shocked to hear that he came here to see Bomi since she has gone viral for being hot at Mickey D's. Paco's already got a plan laid out so he can eventually give her his D, and it starts with him giving her a challenge to make a whole burger in 30 seconds. Otherwise, she has to give him her phone number. He's really backing her into a corner here. But Hoban already knows it will be impossible for her to make that burger when she's still new here, so he has to do something before Paco steals his last bit of hope to get noticed by Bomi. Before Paco even knew it, Hoban had already finished making the burger, which he then places on the counter and explains that he made everything the exact way he wanted, even with the flag on top, so he should hurry up and leave. He knows he's going to get beat up in school by Paco tomorrow for what he just did, but it was worth it to keep Bomi out of his clutches. And it may have even earned him some affection points with her. Later that night, Hoban returns home where he is having ramen for dinner, but he's got a problem on his hands since Snapper threatened him into letting him stream in his house, and he even got Hoban to hand over his mother's bank account details too. On top of that, the ramen he's cooking isn't even for him, so Hoban spits in it before going to hand it over to Snapper. He's over there making $30,000 in donations while in someone else's home, so he's thinking about getting him to split some of that revenue for using his house. However, as Hoban was walking over to Snapper, he trips over the extension cable and inadvertently disconnects Snapper's game while also dumping the hot, spit-filled bowl of ramen on his face. Snapper is enraged and begins beating down on Hoban for costing him $30,000 in donations, and Hoban can't believe he's letting someone beat him up inside his own home. But then Snapper crosses a line when he tells Hoban that he's probably the reason his mother has cancer, and in that moment, something inside him snapped. He grabs some kimchi and throws it in Snapper's face before giving him the most deserved uppercut of his life. Snapper punches him back, but honestly, he hits like a bitch, so Hoban is able to tank it and keep fighting. Standing up for himself isn't as big of a deal as he had always thought it was, so he grabs some more kimchi and begins slugging it out with Snapper, all while the camera is still recording. Elsewhere in the city, a girl sees two teenage boys fighting with food in their boxers, and they don't have her respect, but they got her interest. After the fight has ended and Snapper has been kicked out, Hoban is left with a trash house, and he is starting to feel the pain now that the adrenaline is wearing off. He's also starting to worry about how much it will cost to fix all the damage that was done to this place, but he doesn't want to think about it, so he just rolls up on the floor and goes to sleep. The next morning, Hoban gets a frantic call from Snapper, who is panicking really bad. He yells for Hoban to take the video down, but Hoban doesn't know what Snapper is talking about. Hoban had thought the stream was disconnected when the computer went off, but the webcam never lost power, so everything that happened after that was caught in 4K. Snapper explains that the video of their fight was uploaded to YouTube, and his parents are going to kill him if they see it. Not to mention how bad it looks to lose to someone who's fighting with kimchi. Hoban can't believe what he's hearing, so he goes to YouTube to see for himself, and the video is actually online, in all its kimchi fighting glory. Overnight, it has basically spread all across the world, so Hoban worries that he has gone from being bullied locally to being bullied internationally. But just as he was about to delete the video to save himself any further embarrassment, he notices a comment thread talking about how the number of views equates to the revenue generated. It's about 0.1 yen per view, and the video already has over 10 million views, so Hoban's made 1 million yen overnight. In school, all the students have already witnessed the kimchi fight, and Snapper is lamenting over the fact that his social status has hit rock bottom over this video. He spent so much time sucking up to Paco to get himself high on the social ladder, so he's got to do something to assert his dominance soon. He looks for an easy target and goes over to the class geek to smack him around a bit. But after everyone has seen him lose to Kimchi, his current social standing is so bad that even the loser has the confidence to beat his ass in the middle of class. And Snapper's usual strategy of relying on Paco to scare people isn't going to work anymore since he's ditched him already. Meanwhile, Hoban had just gotten to the hospital, where they informed him that the cost of his mother's treatment for the week has gone up to 120,000, which would be a problem if he wasn't rich now. Outside, Hoban checks on the video and sees that the view count is still going up, so he's making a lot more money, but then he gets sucker punched out of nowhere by Snapper. He's upset that he's become a laughingstock because of Hoban's video, so he starts hassling him to get half the money that was made from the views. Hoban isn't the same wimp he was the day before, so he goes straight for the nuts and starts fighting with him. There's no way he would give Snapper any of his money since it's all in his mom's account, and it was her details that he used to create the stream in the first place. The fight continues, but this time, Hoban isn't scared of him at all since he has already fought him once before, so this time seems easier. Late into the evening, Hoban is comforting a crying Snapper, but he maintains that he still won't be handing over any of the money from the video. That's where Snapper shows him a video he recorded of the fight between him and Hoban just now, so Hoban asks if he intends to post that one as well, but Snapper is smarter than that. If he tries posting this, then people will just claim it's staged and begin insulting both of them. He came here today to ask Hoban to join him because with his help, they can both make a huge amount of money. Hoban may not like Snapper, but he does like money, so Snapper's deal sounds pretty tempting, especially since he was Paco's producer and helped get him where he is today. There's a lot about streaming that Hoban doesn't know about, so he offers to become his producer so that both of them can make a ton of money. Snapper thinks he is being slick and has Hoban hooked like a fool. He plans to make the account his own someday to regain his social status, and he'll use Hoban until he can make that happen. Hoban asks how he wants to split the money, so Snapper suggests that he take 90% of the profit and Hoban takes 10%. It looked like Hoban was about to agree to the terms, but he's not an idiot. Only a moron would agree to such a terrible deal, and they are not friends in the first place, so he flips Snapper off and begins walking away. Snapper is panicking again since his only shot at getting back to where he was is to cooperate with Hoban. So he starts trying to make a deal by going lower on the percentage, but Hoban doesn't seem interested anymore. He finally caves and agrees to do it with only 10% for himself. So Hoban agrees as well and asks what kind of content he had in mind. Snapper underestimated Hoban's intelligence, but since this is the deal he managed to get, he tells Hoban about his idea. They'll be making videos about Hoban confronting bullies in real time. The idea is good, but the next day at school, Paco has already threatened them into being a part of his stream and he intends to make them fight for his own profit. Snapper tells Hoban that this would be a really good time to do that bully confrontation, but Hoban keeps putting it off and saying he'll wait for the right moment. Eventually, while Paco is giving his usual speech to his subscribers about him doing a giveaway, Hoban seizes the moment to interrupt and call him out live on stream for scamming his viewers with the giveaways since no one has ever actually won anything from him. On top of that, Paco is generally just a piece of crap that derives great joy in bullying those weaker than him, and as proof of that, Hoban takes off his shirt to show the bruises Paco has inflicted on him. The way Hoban thinks about it, he gets beat up every time he comes to school anyway, so why not use it to make some money? The commotion draws the attention of a bunch of students in the halls, but they all just think Paco is going to beat up Hoban like usual, so the outcome is clear. However, that doesn't mean they aren't going to stay and watch though. Everything is going according to Snapper's plan since Hoban will be able to draw a bunch of Paco's subscribers over to his channel if he exposes him live, and Paco seems pretty mad about it too. However, Paco's expression quickly changes to a smug grin as he mocks Hoban for trying to expose him on stream, but his phone battery already died, so the stream ended before he could expose him. And since his social status is still secure, Paco intends to make Hoban regret ever trying to mess with him in the first place. He raises his hand and smacks Hoban across the face, following it up with several more slaps. But this is all part of Snapper's plan, as well as he wasn't dumb enough to rely on exposing Paco on his own stream. Snapper already set up his own stream and he has been secretly recording Paco ever since he started beating up Hoban. It's the perfect way to make money off Hoban getting beat up while also ruining Paco's reputation, and it may be working, but Hoban wonders to himself if people really want to see a kid get beat up so badly. He is doing this to make a lot of money so he can afford his mother's treatment without having to keep flipping burgers, and to make sure that happens, he needs to make sure that this video blows up. So he goes for a more interesting type of content and decides instead of just letting himself get beat up, he'll actually fight back. Snapper sees what Hoban is doing and he doesn't think it's a good idea to stand up to Paco since it would have just been a short beating if he stayed quiet, but now that he has challenged him, he's going to be in for the fight of his life. He has to admit that he thinks Hoban has gotten a lot braver in the past few days, but internally, Hoban is pissing himself in fear. He got into stance for a fight, but now that he takes a good look at Paco, there's no way he's fighting that monster and walking away alive. And he can't back out either since everyone already saw him basically challenge Paco to a fight. Now, normally, he would have considered getting down on his knees and apologizing to him so he won't be maimed. But then Paco insulted Hoban's mom for having cancer, and that's when Hoban stopped giving a shit and just went for it. He tackles Paco by going straight for his leg. And that may have actually done something if there wasn't 100 pounds weight difference between the two of them. Paco admits Hoban was fast to catch him off guard like that, but he should have known he was no match for him before he started this. He picks Hoban up and mocks him some more, saying he's going to send him to the hospital so he can be closer to his dying mother. Hoban gets slammed into the ground with such force that he starts reevaluating his life decisions. He never knew weight made such a huge difference in a fight since the only experience he has had is with Snapper, who's around the same weight as him. He knows he has lost the fight, but Paco isn't done yet and gets on top of him to begin caving his face in. But before he can permanently disfigure Hoban, he gets interrupted when a guy tells him he is being too noisy. Paco gets up and is ready to beat up whoever said that as well, but then he realizes that it was Kim, who is known as a rising star in MMA. He immediately takes back everything he just said because he knows Kim could knock him out in a heartbeat if he wanted to, so Kim just tells him to stay quiet because he wants to go back to sleep, but he should make sure he doesn't get woken up again by his antics. Because of this, Paco gives up on beating Hoban up and leaves the class while Hoban lies on the floor. Snapper walks up to him and thinks to himself that even though Hoban lost, the way he stood up to Paco was really cool, so he has gained a ton of fans from this. After school, Paco returned home, and while he didn't show it earlier, he was really relieved that his phone died before Hoban acted out because it would have been really bad for his image if he actually got exposed like that. He finally plugs his phone in, but he is immediately hit with a bunch of piled-up angry DMs from his subscribers, calling him a fraud for faking all those giveaways and being a piece of shit. Meanwhile, Hoban is back home and taking a shower. He knows he lost the fight today, and that's the way his life has been for the longest time, but even if he couldn't land a good hit on Paco, he was at least able to land a good hit to his wallet. Since the video of Paco beating up Hoban was uploaded, it quickly went viral, showing everyone just how bad of a person Paco really is. Of course, Paco tried to salvage the situation and created an apology video the next day, but he made one crucial error. He left the camera rolling afterwards and immediately went on to start insulting his viewers for being dumb. And from there, it was a huge downward spiral since people started looking into some of his old videos. And all of them were found to be staged or fake, so in scientific terms, bro fell off. But one man's downfall is another's staircase, as Hoban has cemented himself as a popular YouTuber and is taking in those big bucks. However, there's no going back now that he is in the public eye, so he needs to think about what he's going to do for his next video. Earlier, when he met with Snapper, they discussed switching the content they created to fights, but there's one major issue with that plan. Hoban still sucks at fighting. At best, he could probably last a minute in a fight before it just turns into a beatdown, but they'll never make any decent money if all the videos are that short. For the videos to be profitable, Hoban is going to need to be able to last at least 3 minutes in a fight, but he has no idea how he's supposed to do that. He turns to the internet for some quick advice on how to fight better, but all the advice involves going through years of training, and Hoban doesn't have time for that. He tries looking up some martial arts videos so he can at least learn some amount of self-defense, but none of them are easy enough to replicate from just looking at a video. Hoban decides that he's just going to have to teach himself how to fight instead, so he just tries looking up some basic principles for a fight, but accidentally misspells the word fight. Strangely, there's actually a channel called How to Fight, but it has no views or subscribers, so Hoban assumes it must have been made by mistake or something. But no, the channel has hundreds of videos despite no one ever seeing them, and this chance encounter with the Chicken Man was going to change Hoban's life forever. In the first video Hoban watches, the Chicken Man named Sambek explains the state of mind you need to be in to control a fight. Rule number 1 is you must never let yourself get worked up during a fight, because once you do, your opponent will be able to take advantage of your recklessness. On the flip side, you should always try to make your opponent slip up and act emotionally, because that will give you a great advantage. So the first thing Sambek is going to be teaching is how to take a hit without getting hurt. Hoban pays full attention to everything Sambek explains in the video, but it seems too easy for him to trust that it works, so he just writes it off as a scam they'll try to sell him a course or something later on. He goes to bed for the night, and the next day, Hoban heads into work to quit since the money he makes her isn't going to be enough to help pay for his mother's treatment. The news that Hoban is quitting reaches the girls in the changing room, and they all already know him from his viral videos. Bomi is particularly interested in hearing about this, so she heads out to the front to meet with Hoban. She thanks him for helping her out last time Paco came here, and since he is quitting, she won't get to see him at work anymore, so she wants to exchange contact info with him so they can keep in touch. This right here is the face of a winner. Although his text game could use some work, he is still having trouble accepting that Bomi actually wants to talk to him. But it's not a dream. While he was still grinning like an idiot, Snapper slides his way in and asks how it feels to be a YouTuber with 100k subscribers. It's really impressive to have gotten that many after only posting 2 videos, but he's got to keep it going, so he needs to come up with a way to last at least 3 minutes in a fight. Hoban thinks back to the Chicken Man video he watched, but he still doesn't think the advice he got from there will be of much use, so he says he needs more time to think of something. Snapper accuses Hoban of not taking things seriously enough. He's famous now, so he needs to start acting like it. Hoban admits that he may be famous now, but being famous usually only brings trouble. Case in point, Rumi. She approaches Hoban and asks to do a live stream with him. So since Hoban and Snapper have been dying of thirst for years, they immediately agree. Snapper snaps out of it for a moment and asks why she wants to stream with him, when she used to team up with Paco all the time. But she just says her viewers have been asking her to stream with Hoban for a while now, and she already ditched Paco after he lost all his following, so she's ready to hop on the Hoban train. Hoban is loving every minute of this, and Snapper tries to get in on the action by adding a condition that Rumi brings a friend so it can be a double date. Just then, Paco bursts into the room and he's out for blood. Hoban ruined his YouTube channel, so he's going to make sure he beats him harder than ever. Paco is insanely angry, but that makes Hoban recall what Sandbag's video had said about a worked-up opponent being totally reckless. Paco is just looking for a fight here, so since Sandbag was right about one thing, Hoban decides to try out his advice on how to take a hit without getting hurt since he'll definitely get punched anyway. However, before Paco could actually punch Hoban, Snapper comes in clutch with the camera set up and records the whole thing. With the current state of Paco's reputation, if a video like this were to be released, it would tank whatever little following he had left, so Paco was forced to back off for now. But he swears that he'll come back to get his revenge on them later. Once Paco leaves, Snapper falls to the floor since he was so scared, but at least he managed to get Paco to back off for now. He asks if Hoban is okay, but he is currently preoccupied thinking about how effective Sandbag's advice actually is. The next day, Hoban is out in town and he is supposed to be meeting Snapper so they can discuss their next video idea, but Snapper is late, so Hoban takes out his phone and immediately starts texting Bomi. It's been 3 days since he got her number and he still gets really excited every time she replies to him. But this time, she says she doesn't like texting with him anymore. She wants to move up to phone calls. Hoban is about to call her right now, but then he gets approached by a couple who recognize him as the famous YouTuber. Hoban finds this awkward, but he is glad that even scary people like these guys are acting friendly with him since he is famous. Long story short, he got mugged. Fortunately, he hasn't gotten all the YouTube money yet, so there wasn't much on him for them to steal, but it still sucks being mugged. Just then, Snapper shows up and Hoban thinks he is finally saved, but Snapper doesn't know how to fight at all, so he gets punched into the ground. The guy tells Hoban to hand over his phone since it's the only valuable thing he has on him right now, so he does so without a fight since it's just a phone. However, he soon remembers that Boney's phone number is on that phone, so he can't afford to lose it. He tries to get the man to take Snapper's phone instead, but he has no such luck. Snapper gets up, so Hoban tells him to call the cops so they can get his phone back, but Snapper has a better idea. He had been filming Hoban the entire time he was getting mugged, and his subscribers are all rooting for him to go after those muggers since they are well known around this area. This is Hoban's chance to make a video that will make him even more money, so even if he might get beat up again, he's going to take it. Hoban and Snapper later confront the muggers in a karaoke room, and Hoban demands that he gets his phone back. Snapper is recording the whole thing since a fight is definitely going to start, while Hoban is trying to stay calm and remember what he learned from the Chicken Man. He needs to keep track of which hand is his opponent's dominant one, and since he is holding the microphone with his right hand, then Hoban needs to stay to his left side. This, along with the small nature of the room, will make it so that the guy has no other choice but to throw a punch with his right hand, and once he begins the motion, Hoban puts his plan into action. He may know that the punch is coming, but that doesn't guarantee that he can avoid it, so if he's going to get punched anyway, he wants to try out Sandbag's technique to take a punch without getting hurt. Both Snapper and the girl are shocked to see him just stand there and take a punch, but don't worry, there's actually science behind this, trust me. Hoban ducked into the punch in order to stop his momentum before the opponent could build up enough force. Hoban himself couldn't believe that worked so well as he barely felt the punch, but then he got distracted for a little too long since by the time he snaps out of it, another punch is already headed his way, and he was too slow to react, so this one is actually going to hurt. However, the guy just plain misses his shot. Hoban remembers something Sandbag said about regular people usually sucking at throwing an accurate punch, so when combined with a punch interception, even if you fail to get in position, the movement should be enough to make the punch miss anyway, and as a bonus, Hoban looks really cool while dodging the punches. But even if the punches actually do connect, he isn't going to feel the pain anyway, so Hoban can focus on what's really important. Getting his phone back so he can call Bomi. Things continue like this for a while, and yes, Hoban is holding his ground against the man, but there is one major problem. He never watched any videos about how to counterattack, so he's just stuck taking hits over and over. Snapper doesn't think things are going well because the fight is dragging on way too long, which is leading to their view count going down as he speaks. He contemplates getting involved so they can end this before they lose any more viewers, but then he sees a message in chat that says Hoban is going to win the fight. It makes no sense to him since Hoban has done nothing but dodge and occasionally take punches straight to the head, but the well-informed viewer goes on to type an essay in chat saying that while it may be true that Hoban has been taking a lot of hits, but the guy's fists are in just as bad shape after all that bare-knuckle punching. He may not have noticed up till now because of the adrenaline, but he's surely going to feel it now. The guy falls to the floor in absolute agony once the pain from his broken hands sets in, so Hoban is victorious. However, it sure doesn't look like he won with how badly his face got beat up, but none of that's important right now because he finally has his phone back and can reply to Bomi. Snapper is starting to think that this may not have been worth it after all, but they did manage to gain a bunch of new fans thanks to Hoban's resilience. By the end of the week, they already have 1 million views on the video, and since they started the channel, they have gotten a total of 25 million views. And since they finally completed all the approvals, it's time to get paid. The total payout for the revenue is 2 million yuan, and Hoban is in awe of the amount of money he is currently holding in his hand. But still, for 25 million views, Hoban had thought he would get a lot more out of this. Snapper explains that the smaller amount is because it took them a while to get verified and put ads in their video. Hoban asks if they can really keep making this much money if they continue creating violent content like usual, but Snapper says it's not that simple. They got lucky this time, but if they aren't careful, they may end up angering the new tube gods. Every new tuber has nightmares of the horrifying yellow mark that appears whenever the content is too violent or graphic. They'll need to find ways around it if they want to continue with their channel. But just as they were doing some much-needed research, they noticed Rui out in the street. She seems to be streaming right now, and her male audience will definitely be subscribing to her OnlyFans later. But once she spots Hoban, she sees a golden opportunity to gain more viewers, so she starts heading straight for them. However, Hoban and Snapper want nothing to do with her, so they get out of there really quick. Once they finally lost her, they take a moment to catch their breath, and that's when Hoban notices a really cool outfit in a store. And even though it's just a tracksuit, you can tell that this thing probably costs at least 30 or 40k. But since he just got his payout, then maybe he can afford to splurge just this once. That's why he was thinking until saw that the tracksuit actually cost 140k, which is the same as the amount Hoban has to pay Snapper for his cut. Even he isn't dumb enough to waste that much money on a tracksuit, but Snapper apparently is because he doesn't think twice about dumping his whole paycheck on it. He tells Hoban that it is a basic necessity now that they are making a lot of money, but even with the fact that he makes 2 million yuan a month, he still chooses to make good financial decisions. But then he gets a text from Bomi and smart financial decisions go straight out the window because he needs to look cool for his crush. She asked to meet him out in town and he's getting really nervous because this place is full of couples, so he decides to start a live stream, but that draws a lot of unwanted attention, but it's also getting him a lot of desperately wanted attention as a girl comes running up to him asking for a selfie. But Hoban's emotional state hits rock bottom when he realizes that the girl was talking to the handsome YouTuber that was standing behind him. This guy is out in the street interviewing all the pretty girls he can find, and he soon spots an especially pretty girl, so he tries to get an interview with her as well, but the girl says she can't chat with him because she is meant to be meeting someone here, and it's at that moment Bomi finally spots Hoban. And coincidentally, she was wearing the same outfit as Hoban, so they've already got something in common. Hoban always hated the popular crowd because they were so much better than him. He was short, ugly, bitchless, and 10 IQ points away from being able to collect disability, so there wasn't much he is going for him. If nothing else, he at least wanted to be a good fighter, but that was just a pipe dream while he was forced to do whatever Paco wanted. However, there are people who even Paco didn't dare to disrespect, like Munsong, which is why Hoban wanted to be like him so much. But that's all in the past now because Hoban finally has a chance with his crush, but that doesn't change anything about his ugly face. This is all Hoban could ever ask for, and when his hand accidentally touches Bomi, he goes into a trance and can see his entire future with Bomi as his loving wife, children and all. But Hoban is snapped out of his fantasy by Bomi when she calls his name and asks if he doesn't want to eat at this cafe after all. Hoban realizes he is being weird, but he can't tell her he was imagining their married life, so he just comes up with an excuse that he's a man of few words, and while Bomi accepts it, she is a little upset and begins pouting a bit. While they are standing at the counter, Hoban starts to feel a little self-conscious because he thinks Bomi is getting bored hanging around him. And his situation isn't helped by the fact that a nearby couple immediately starts making fun of him for being short. He starts thinking that Bomi must be embarrassed to be seen with someone as vertically challenged as him, so he kicks off his jacket so Bomi doesn't have to be seen in a matching outfit with him. And from that moment on, he started acting rather cold to Bomi, and would only answer her questions with bland and uninteresting responses. He can't hold a conversation for more than 2 sentences, so Balmy sees that this chat is going nowhere and puts an end to the date right then and there, saying they should probably get going. Hoban is fun to chat with over text, but in person, he doesn't even attempt to talk to her. She apologizes for dragging him all the way out here to chat when he obviously didn't want to, but Hoban tells her she's got it all wrong. The truth is that he has never actually been on a date with a girl or even spoken to one so casually before. Nor has he been to a fancy cafe before, so he doesn't know how to act, especially since he gets really nervous whenever he looks at Balmy's pretty face. Hoban must have maxed out his charm stat because everything he said just makes Balmy like him even more, so they leave together, and all the while, a girl who has been stalking Hoban this entire day nods approvingly. While on their stroll, Balmy gets a call from an old friend of hers, and the person says they're close by, so they're on their way to meet up with her. Balmy apologizes to Hoban for bringing a third wheel on their date, but the person who just called is a friend from her grade school, but they lost touch a while ago, which is why he wants to catch up now. Hoban does not see anything wrong with this until Balmy mentions that her friend is Munsong, and all of a sudden, Hoban's chances with Balmy seem non-existent if this is the friend she tells him not to worry about. Hoban gets a new vision of the future, but this time Munsong is married to Balmy, and he's just a random guy that shows up for no reason. Balmy gets Hoban to snap out of his daydream once more, and she asks if Hoban happens to know Munsong since she thinks they go to the same school. Hoban doesn't know what to say to this, so he just agrees, saying that he and Munsong are really close friends so Balmy doesn't find out that he was a total loser in school. However, he immediately regrets lying about it because Munsong arrives and he's got the same jacket on as well. Balmy tells him his friend is here too, but Munsong has no idea who she is talking about, so when she points at Hoban, his heart skips a beat because he is definitely going to be called out for lying. However, by some miracle, Munsong is actually a pretty nice guy, so he goes along with it and says he is friends with him since they are in the same class, even though he barely remembers Hoban's name, so Hoban is wondering why he is being so nice to him. With that awkward encounter having ended, the three now start walking down the street in their matching outfits, but with how good of a pair Balmy and Munsong look like, Hoban feels like he has been demoted to a third wheel, and he doesn't want to stick around any longer so he doesn't have to watch Balmy get stolen away from him. He stops in his tracks and says he has to go home since his feet are hurting, and Balmy seems genuinely upset that he had to leave so soon, but she and Munsong have nothing else to do but carry on with their plans. As Hoban walks away, Snapper, who had been stalking him with a camera, grabs him for being an idiot and giving up on the date so soon. He and Balmy were getting along so well, so it makes no sense for him to leave now, but Hoban didn't want to stick around and try to get in between those two. Anyone could tell that they look perfect together, so compared to them, he is nothing more than an ugly toe getting in the way. Snapper gives him some words of wisdom and says love is all about fighting for the one you cherish. So is Hoban going to give up on pursuing Balmy just because his strong rival has appeared? Hoban doesn't think he has a chance of winning Balmy from Munsong, but as a famous coach once said, you miss all the shots you don't take. Hoban has been underestimating himself this whole time because at the end of the day, it was Balmy who asked him out on this date. Why would she invite him out and buy him coffee if she wasn't interested in him at all? And she looked so sad when Hoban said he was leaving, so he was really about to fumble the bag when he was already at the finish line. Hoban's eyes have been opened and he thanks Snapper for giving him the confidence to go back out and tell Balmy how he feels, but Snapper's whole speech wasn't motivated by kindness, but rather he played the part of a W wingman just for the views. His real intention is to have a stream of Hoban getting rejected and rake in the views at his expense, but as he chases after him to witness Hoban getting his heart broken, he sees something he never expected. As Hoban got to the table where Balmy and Munsong were sitting together, he tells them that he got over his toe pain, so he's fine to spend the rest of the day together. Munsong is a little concerned about Hoban's toe pain, but since he says he is fine, he gets up to take his leave. Hoban is shocked that Munsong is leaving already, but he never planned to stay long in the first place since he has to practice for his upcoming match. Hoban is internally kicking himself for nearly giving up on his date with Balmy when Munsong isn't even interested in stealing Balmy from him. As Munsong leaves, he turns back to Hoban and tells him that he thinks he is a good fighter. He saw his last video and recognized that he was taking the punches earlier to minimize the damage, and he believes Hoban wasn't striking back on purpose, even though he just never learned how to attack. Munsong says he looks forward to seeing Hoban's next video, and Hoban now knows that he needs to learn the next step of that combo. But before that, he sits with Balmy on a bench, and she asks if he came back because he has something to tell her. Hoban needs a moment to draw the courage to answer and asks her what her ideal type of guy is. Now Bomi is embarrassed as well and answers that she likes honest guys more than anything, and Hoban is excited because honesty is something he can do. He's about to tell her how he honestly feels about her, but first he picks Snapper out of the bushes since he knew he would be trying to film his confession. But then he notices that Snapper is in pretty bad shape, and that's because Paco found him. Thanks to the stream, Paco was able to track down Hoban and Bomi down, and now he's going to get his revenge. Hoban can see that things are going to end up bad, so he tells Bomi to get out of here, but Paco has beef with her as well since she didn't give him her number that time he asked for it. He calls Bomi a trifling hoe, and Hoban nearly loses control at the disrespect directed towards his crush, but he remains calm because he knows anger won't help him win this fight. He resolves to make Paco lose his temper first, so Hoban taunts him into attacking him first and tries to use the same technique as before, but unfortunately, since Paco watched the video, he knows all about that trick and counters with an uppercut. Hoban now remembers what Sandbag had said about not using the same move too often because it can easily be countered once your opponent knows about it, but Hoban doesn't know any other moves he can use because he never watched the other videos. Paco continues walking towards Hoban to beat him up more, and Hoban can't think of any methods to fight back. He gets set into a flashback of how terrible his life has been with all the bullying he had to go through, but that he got a golden opportunity to make a lot of money with his YouTube channel, and because of that, he thought he could finally fit in and become a regular kid. But that also made him grow complacent and neglect any training to become a better fighter, and now it has come back to bite him. He's getting jumped like he always was before, but back then, he thought it was easier to just get beat up than it was to resist because the pain from wounds would eventually fade away, but this time it's way worse. He didn't want Bomi to see him get beaten, so he pleads with Paco to let her go home safely, but Paco is enjoying himself way too much to let either of them go. He tells Hoban to get down on the ground and plead for forgiveness, and Hoban is willing to do it if it means Bomi will be safe. But then Paco changes his mind and tells him to take his pants off so he can be thoroughly humiliated on his own channel. That's when Hoban notices that Paco's goons have been forcing Snapper to film this whole thing, so Hoban's pride is in shambles. But what really made it sink in for him that he's a bitch is the fact that Bomi had enough courage to slap Paco when he couldn't resist. Paco gets angry and grabs Bomi by the jacket, but before he does anything, he tells Snapper to point his camera somewhere else so people don't see that he's about to punch a girl. But Hoban takes action to stop Bomi from getting hurt by drawing attention to himself and taking off his pants like Paco had wanted. Paco finds it amusing that Hoban actually strips, so he says he'll let him go once he deletes his YouTube channel. However, Hoban has one final secret weapon up his sleeve and prepares to get rid of his underwear as well, so that Paco's channel gets banned forever. But before Hoban can have his twig and berries live streamed to the whole world, Munsong arrives and holds his underwear up, telling him that he doesn't need to do that. In no time, he began taking down the goons one by one with his martial arts skills and had Paco pleading for mercy. Once he was done beating all of them up, he goes over to Bomi and asks if she's okay. And while she says she is fine, she is more concerned about Hoban since he was beaten up pretty badly. Munsong tells her that they should head home now, but she insists that she needs to go check on Hoban. However, Munsong can tell that after the mess that just occurred, Hoban may need some alone time to himself to think about things. Hoban has a moment of deep thought and begins wondering when he became such a loser. At first, he was pretty positive and outgoing in school, but then one day, Paco took Hoban's lack of suffering personally and decided to make his life a living hell. Hoban couldn't understand why he was getting beat up all of a sudden, and of course he wouldn't understand because Paco had no reason for it beyond just feeling like it. Right now, he doesn't even have the energy to curse Paco for what he did, so he just sits there and cries for a while as Snapper apologizes for what happened. By the next day, Paco is already up to his old antics, and he doesn't care if people think he's a scumbag for what he did yesterday because there will always be like-minded scumbags that will support him. And today, he has something special planned for his scumbag audience because he has bullied Snapper into putting on makeup for their amusement. But Snapper doesn't even care that Paco is trying to make a fool of him because he's wondering what could have happened to Hoban because he didn't come to school today or the last couple of days either. Snapper wants to meet him again and apologize for causing that mess, but he's been no contact for a while now. Even Bomi can't reach him because he isn't picking up her calls either, and all this while, Hoban has had himself locked inside his room, binge-watching Sandbag's videos so he can finally learn to do more than survive a fight. He wants to learn how to be a normal person in a fight, and he is willing to put in as much work as needed to make it happen. Stanback believes that even with all the self-help courses in the world, a person is never going to change unless they have the drive to do so on their own, and in Hoban's case, his anger will serve as that drive to push him to grow as a fighter. Stanback says his full training course will take a month for someone to learn, but in that time, Snapper has been relentlessly bullied by Paco, all in an attempt to bait Hoban into coming back to school. But Snapper is actually being a good friend for once and doesn't want Hoban to come and put himself in danger. Snapper says that if Hoban is watching this stream, then he should stay away from school for his own safety. And while Hoban is indeed watching the stream, he's already here and standing right behind Snapper. Paco is happy that he finally gets to beat Hoban up again, but Hoban seems a lot more confident than he was last time. He walks into class and tosses his phone over to Snapper, who is still a little confused. He looks down and sees the phone is already streaming live, and Hoban tells him to hurry up and start filming because this is the video marking his return to YouTube and is going to be about him beating Paco in a fight. We get a flashback to Snapper's experience in school after the incident in the park, and with Hoban gone, Snapper was trying to get on the good side of Rumi, who had just reached 100k subscribers. It has been a month since Hoban last came to school, but Snapper can understand why he doesn't want to show his face after the humiliation he had to go through. Rumi recalls Snapper being friends with Hoban, but Snapper immediately denies ever having a friendly relationship with such a loser. And on a completely unrelated note, Snapper asks if Rumi happens to need a producer for her YouTube channel, since he has a lot of experience with them. But he gets interrupted by Paco, who also questions him about being friends with Hoban, but Snapper once again denies it, saying it was just a business partnership for his channel, and seeing as Hoban isn't around right now, he's ready to jump ship. After listening to Snapper's speech, Paco gut punches him and proceeds to beat him down in the middle of class because he is disgusted by how easily Snapper is ready to betray the people around him for his own benefit. First, he betrayed Paco in favor of Hoban, and now he wants to betray Hoban as well, so Snapper has earned the ire of all his classmates. But in his defense, that's all he can do to help himself. He has no talents, can't get good grades, or make money on his own, so the only way he can survive is by sucking up to those stronger than him. Life is unfair to people like him, especially when the bullies never learn their lesson, because even though Paco already sank to rock bottom once after getting exposed as a scumbag, all he had to do was embrace his scumbag nature on stream, and now he's already back to 900k subscribers. And he's only getting more popular as time goes by. Meanwhile, Hoban's channel is bleeding subscribers by the minute because they haven't posted anything in a month and Hoban is MIA. Paco is to blame for all of it, but right now he's just busy thinking of a good video idea to get his channel to 1 million, and he has the perfect idea in mind, so he goes up to Snapper and tells him to bring Hoban to school tomorrow so he can beat him up and get his channel to 1 million views. But Snapper can't believe that Paco is so callously asking him to sell Hoban out like this. But then Paco says he's willing to hire Snapper back as his cameraman if he gets Hoban to come to school, and all of a sudden, Snapper is feeling pretty motivated, so he says he'll do it. He knows he is trash for doing this to Hoban, but he justifies it by saying he needs to do whatever it takes to survive in this cruel world. But since he forgot where Hoban's house is a while ago, he rushes to the hospital to ask Hoban's mom instead. Hoban's mom didn't know Hoban hasn't been going to school, but Snapper can explain why, or the fact that he's only trying to get him to come to school so he can be beaten up. So he just leaves that information out and says he has been to the house before, but he just forgot what the address is, so he needs her to write it down for him. Hoban's mom doesn't question it and immediately writes down her full address for Snapper, and once he has the paper in his hand, he believes he has punched his ticket to getting back in the good graces of Paco. But by the next day, the only thing that got punched was Snapper. Paco is angry at him because he didn't manage to get Hoban to come to school after all. Paco made a whole announcement and even had a deal with his viewers that he'd get 50k yen if he actually beats up Hoban. But Paco doesn't want to hear any of these excuses and begins smacking Snapper around. However, since Snapper failed to get Hoban here by going to his house, Paco decides to make a video of Snapper to force Hoban to come out of hiding and save him. But this is where Snapper finally learns a little about friendship and decides to not sell Hoban out. Instead, while he's on camera, he warns Hoban not to come to school right now because Paco has a mission to beat him up. And if he does it, he'll get 50k in. Back when Hoban's mom gave him the address, he was about to leave to sell Hoban out, but then Hoban's mom asks if his name happens to be Snapper, and after he confirms it, she gets really happy because Hoban had told her all about him. He mentioned how glad he was to have finally made a friend in school, and hearing that Hoban thinks of him as a friend, he realizes how wrong he has been. So even if he's getting beat up by Paco, he won't betray him. This brings us back to the moment Paco was calling Hoban out on stream while using Snapper as bait, but even now Snapper still pleaded with Hoban not to come here for his own safety, but Hoban was already right behind him. Snapper calls Hoban an idiot for coming here even though he told him not to come, but Hoban is more focused on making sure Snapper captures every move he makes on camera. Paco mocks Hoban for acting so stupid and throws a palm strike at him, but Hoban uses the get hit without taking damage technique so he is unharmed. Hoban is bobbing and weaving all over the place, but Paco isn't phased though because he has countered this once before, so he throws his side punch. In a flashback, we see Hoban right after he got his ass handed to him by Paco in front of Bomi, and he is rewatching the video Sandbach made saying that only an idiot would expect the same move to work over and over again. Hoban is aware that he got cocky and overconfident, leading to his defeat and humiliation in front of his crush. He can't bring himself to see her again like this, and nor can he face his YouTube viewers, but he still needs the money from the channel, so he can't give up on it. He resolves to keep watching Sandbach's videos and clicks on the next one titled, How to Be a Regular Person in a Fight. He says learning this technique will take a wild month of hard work and dedication to learn, but Hoban is willing to try. The first step is getting some protein and bulking like there's no tomorrow. Body weight is a huge factor in fighting, so Hoban chucks all the protein he can find in a blender and chugs it, but it comes right back out because that shit was disgusting. He doesn't want to do this anymore, but then he sees Sandbach mention that drinking raw meat ain't good, so just go buy actual protein shakes. The second step is to have the willpower to push through the training because all that protein needs to be put to good use in building muscle. After that, Hoban needs to build stamina, so he goes to the pool to swim in order to build his endurance so he can last in long fights. But once he's done, he finishes the rest of the video and Sandbach says that everything that he just did isn't going to do jack to improve his build or stamina in just 1 month. Hoban feels betrayed, but Sandbach continues by saying that taking down a stronger opponent is going to come down to skill, and he's going to teach him the perfect technique for brawling. A reporter once asked a famous fighter what martial arts would be best for a kid who is getting bullied, and the man said there's only one skill that a kid would need to learn. So back to the present, Hoban runs up to Paco, and in one swift motion, he dooms Paco to a future of arthritis. Hoban has to practice this low kick 10,000 times over the past month, so he is glad his training paid off. Paco tries to pretend he didn't feel that kick from Hoban and mocks him for missing his thigh, but the target was never the thigh to begin with. While conventional low kicks usually aim for the thigh to build up damage over time, aiming lower deals a lot of instant damage to the opponent. Munsong is proud that Hoban was actually practicing to get better after all, and as the fight continues, Paco charges at Hoban to throw another punch, but during Hoban's training, he also watched a lot of JoJo. So he starts running away to keep his distance from Paco. So long as Paco can't reach him, he will eventually have another opening, and once the opening presents itself, Hoban delivers another calf kick to Paco. Everyone is shocked that Hoban is actually holding his ground against Paco, but Munsong is wondering why Hoban hasn't bothered using another move for a while now. Paco thinks Hoban only learned how to do calf kicks, so once he figures out how to block them, he thinks he has got Hoban against the ropes now. However, Hoban learned his lesson from last time, so he anticipated that the calf kick wouldn't be enough to win him the entire fight, so he had to learn a second move. Learning more than one skill in a month is no easy feat, but Hoban isn't the same weakling he was before, so while Paco was fixated on blocking another kick, Hoban switches things up and throws an overhand punch which knocks Paco down to the floor and out cold. There's silence in the class as everyone is stunned since no one really thought Hoban would win, but then Paco's goons try to avenge him, so Snapper steps in and warns them not to lay a finger on his friend. The goons seem to actually be a bit scared, but it's not because of Snapper, but rather Munsong who came to Hoban's aid. He turns to Hoban and tells him that he did a great job, so there's no need to be crying, but Hoban isn't crying out of pain. These are tears of victory, and he commemorates his victory by asking his viewers to like and subscribe for more content. Following that day, Paco started skipping school a lot, but likely not because he's scared of Hoban, because at the end of the day, Hoban's win could be summed up as nothing more than a little skill and a lot of dumb luck. He's more likely too ashamed to show his face in school after his reputation tanked. Hoban thinks Paco deserves it, but he feels a little bad about being the cause of all Paco's suffering. Oh wait, no he doesn't. Paco and his stupid YouTube channel. Hoban is loving every minute of Paco's suffering. As an added bonus, all the subscribers that Paco is losing are all flowing to Hoban's channel now, so Hoban has officially hit the milestone of 100K, and he is really grateful to each and every one of his viewers, so he makes a thanks video and does a headstand. And with all the new income, he was also able to buy his mom a new jacket, but she still has no idea about any of his new antics, so she wonders where he could have gotten the money to buy something like this because she's pretty sure they are broke. Hoban lies and says he got the jacket on sale for really cheap, but it actually costs more than their monthly rent. Changing topics, Hoban's mom mentions that his friend came here a while ago, and Hoban thinks she must be talking about Munson, since he's the only one he considers a friend. Snapper was outside the door to the room, and when he heard this, he went ballistic because he had a whole character arc for Hoban, and it turns out he doesn't even see him as a friend. He gets into a fight with Hoban over it, but Hoban is just smiling because he does actually see Snapper as a friend, although he can be a bit of a jerk sometimes. After Hoban and Snapper have made up with each other, they both have a meeting where Snapper mentions that it might be a good idea to get themselves a professional editor to really help their channel grow. Hoban doesn't think it's really necessary since Snapper has been doing all the editing up till now, but Snapper only knows the basics, and even that was just from him watching others do it. No matter how good their content is, it may become a routine, and people may end up getting tired of it, so they need to have a skilled editor to help keep things exciting for the viewers. Hoban is on board with the idea, but he wonders how they are supposed to find someone who's really good at editing. He suggests making a job post, but Snapper thinks that's far too old-fashioned for the current time, so instead, he starts a live stream. Hoban and Snapper both get on the bed, and Snapper tells the viewers that they are currently looking for an editor, so they'd really like to get some applicants. They ask everyone to write down their skill set and prior experience in the comment section so they can choose someone, but a lot of the viewers have no other special skills aside from living in their parents' basement. Hoban doesn't think any of these guys would be good editors, and Snapper agrees with him. So they try to clarify the job requirements and ask if anyone in chat has any editing experience. Then finally, the guy who always explains the things Hoban does on stream speaks up and says he is pretty good at editing videos. Snapper doesn't want to claim he is lying, but he is a little skeptical of the guy's skill with videos. But since he volunteered anyway, Hoban thinks they should at least meet with him so they can verify his skill. Snapper doesn't want to hire this guy since he is probably an old dude, but Hoban doesn't care how old he is as long as he is good at editing. So they ask the guy to send them his contact information so that they can meet with him for an interview. Later at school, Snapper comes up to Hoban and asks him if the old guy ended up contacting him after all, and Hoban says he did, but the greeting card he sent Hoban is so old-fashioned that Snapper immediately wants to just block him and never speak about this again. Even though Hoban is put off by the greeting card as well, he doesn't think it's right for them to cancel the interview since they did promise to meet him. Snapper asks how they are going to be doing the interview anyway, but Hoban isn't sure on the details since the guy just said he'd show up here at some point. And Hoban is pretty worried since he doesn't know how to interact with people like him. However, it turns out that the old man is actually a girl from their school, but she doesn't acknowledge their surprise at all and just smiles, saying they should get the interview started. The girl's name is Lee, and she's pretty famous for being the cutest first year, although she isn't very popular in her class regardless. She apparently grew up in a foreign country, so she learned Japanese from the internet, and now she only knows how to speak as if she's trying to sell you a car. Snapper can't believe he mistook her for an old man, and he finds the way she talks to be hilarious. But then Lee grabs his finger and tells him it's rude to point, and Snapper is now in delusional love, the same way Hoban was with Bomi, complete with a full plan of their future life together, but Hoban snaps him out of it because they still have an interview to get done. Snapper is embarrassed that he fell head over heels for Lee from just touching her hand, but he still thinks she's really cute though. Lee has gone through the effort of editing one of their videos for Hoban to review, and Hoban is impressed that she even went as far as to create an introduction from his channel. Snapper immediately jumps in and decides that Lee is the perfect person for the job, which is a decision that is totally unrelated to his crush on her. But Hoban still wants to do a more thorough interview. He likes the fact that Lee highlighted the funny comments in the video because it adds to the comedic effect, so he can definitely tell that Lee knows what she's doing, but he still can't tell whether it's worth hiring him or not. He asks her if there were any parts that she struggled to edit, so she scrolls over to the part where Hoban was about to take off his underwear on camera, as she found it really difficult to censor that part, but Hoban is so embarrassed that he hires Lee on the spot so that they can stop talking about it. Since Hoban is now on board with hiring Lee, Snapper thinks everything is settled, but Hoban still has one more question before he officially hires Lee. If she is so talented with editing, she could probably get a position with any other YouTube channel, so he wonders why she chose to come to him instead. Her interest in Hoban all started on the day that he first squared up against Paco. Hoban stood no chance of winning back then, but the look in his eyes made her willing to follow him, so she's excited to finally be working together. Hoban feels the same way, so after finalizing things with a handshake, they make an announcement on the channel that they found an editor. Balma sees this announcement, and while she's glad Hoban is able to work on his new YouTube channel again, She wishes he would at least talk to her on the phone like before, but it's been radio silence from him. As she is walking down the street, she sees a crowd of people gathered around an arcade, and they are all contemplating whether they should call the police or an ambulance after what they just witnessed. Bomber arrives at the door and she is shocked to see 4 guys laid out on the floor, while one is calmly sitting on a chair and playing a game. The leader of the gang that was just beaten up kicks the guy's chair and asks if he is the one who beat up all of his friends. The guy in the chair doesn't acknowledge the gang leader's question and instead asks him if he can borrow some money so he can keep playing the game, all while having a look on his face that says, "I can beat your ass if I want to." Meanwhile, Snapper is showing Hoban a video about a mixed martial arts fighter named Taehan, or rather a former fighter because he got fired for causing too many problems and having a bad reputation. Snapper continues, saying that Taehan had studied martial arts since he was very young, but Snapper finds it really funny that it's actually Taekwondo that he studied. He believes Taekwondo is a stupid martial art because it relies mainly on kicks, so if you take your opponent down to the ground, then you've won the fight. He thinks even he could handle Taehan in a fight as long as he watched out for his kicks, but that Lee comes up to both of them and calls Snapper an amateur for believing that Taekwondo is completely ineffective in a fight. While it may be true that sports Taekwondo would never work in a street fight because it is practiced with the purpose of scoring as many hits as possible, real combat Taekwondo is a whole different story because it aims to knock the opponent as quickly as possible. And Hoban agrees with her, but he still doesn't know what this has to do with him. Snapper reminds Hoban that their channel is based around standing up to bullies, so for their next video, he wants Hoban to fight Taehan. Hoban starts yelling that Snapper is crazy if he thinks he will fight Taehan, but this whole idea came from one of their viewers. Lee explains that Taekwondo is widely renowned as an exceptional fighting technique, although it is really flashy, so it does end up leaving a lot of openings to be exploited. However, there is an exception to this rule within the moveset of Taekwondo, and that is the back kick. Its power and precision make it one of the most feared moves in all of mixed martial arts. But while Hoban is glad to receive all this information, this isn't some random thug they are telling him to fight, this is a professional fighter. So what exactly do they expect him to do against a monster like him? He asks if they can't just switch content to an eating challenge or something, but he has already built up a fan base that wants to see fights, so he can't switch things up now. For now, let's talk a bit about the devil that is known as Taehan. He's a real psychopath and was once a famous Taekwondo practitioner, but then he suddenly quit without an explanation, and now he just picks in random people for fun, just like he did when he told a kid to swap shoes with him. He always gets what he wants because he is much stronger than everyone else, but the reason they call him a devil is because he won't beat you up directly, but rather, he'll target your friend and make you watch unless you give him what he wants. And on top of it all, Taehan doesn't even care about the stuff he steals, but he keeps doing it, just so he can have an excuse to beat people up and look down on them. Hoban has heard enough of Taehan's backstory because he is still utterly terrified to deal with him. Snapper tells him he can't back out of challenging him since he already made a promise to his viewers. Hoban says he may have said he would fight thugs, but he never said anything about fighting professionals. Lee is enraged by how much of a scumbag Taehan is, but Hoban tells her to calm down because he can't think of even the smallest reason to fight Taehan since he has never done anything to him personally, and he can't exactly go out to fight a stranger just because another stranger suggested it. Later, while Taehan is walking down the street and thinking about how he wants to be rich, he gets cornered by the boss of the gang that he beat up earlier, and the big guy starts threatening him for daring to hit his friends, but before he is even done with the sentence, Taehan had already gone and struck another one of his friends down. The big guy recognizes Taehan's attack as being Taekwondo, but he is one of those people who thinks Taekwondo is useless in a real fight because all he needs to do is grab Taehan. But that's easier said than done since Taehan is way faster than the guy had thought he would be, and his kicks are really powerful as well since the first one knocks the guy back. The guy assumes Taehan will be going for a roundhouse kick next, so he puts up his arm to guard against it. However, at the last moment, Taehan switches things up and instead strikes the guy in the back of the head. And it all went downhill from there as Takao is pummeled by Taehan until he can't fight back anymore. He starts asking Takao's friend for 100 yen if he wants to save his friend, and the guy was willing to hand it over, but then Taehan raises the price to 1 million just so he has to watch as his friend is beaten to a pulp. All this while, Snapper has been recording this whole mess, and he realizes that Taehan is an even bigger psychopath than the rumors said. He's having mixed feelings about having Hoban face someone so dangerous, but they did promise the viewers that he'd fight Taehan, so he doesn't know what to do. Just then, Taehan notices Snapper, so he tries to hide himself behind the wall, but it looks like Taehan found him regardless. Taehan asks why Snapper was filming him, so he makes up an excuse about wanting to record because he thought the Taekwondo moves were really cool. It looked like Ta-hun was buying Snapper's excuse, but then Lee comes running up like she's going to pick a fight with Ta-hun. But upon getting a little closer, she realized she'd rather not get her face kicked in, so now all three are quietly standing there and waiting for Ta-hun to let them go. They promise to delete the recording of Ta-hun and try slowly walking away, but then Tae-hun reveals that he knew that they were from the YouTube channel Viral Hit, and he had thought they came to fight him since he heard about their new video idea. But this is perfect timing for him since he knows YouTube pays a lot, so he tells Hobin to hand over his channel. And he begins beating Snapper up to persuade him to do it. Hobin is in disbelief that he would go looking for any reason just to beat someone up, but even though Snapper has had his face messed up, when Tae-hun demands access to the YouTube channel again, he refuses because they put too much work into building it up. Hobin tries to defuse the situation and talk things out with Tae-hun, but he is disrespectfully interrupted when Tae-hun puts his boot up to Hobin's face and reminds him that he doesn't want to hear any words unless it's the password to the channel. Hobin is no idiot, so he knows damn well that he would only get clobbered if he even attempted to fight Tae-hun here. He's way out of range, so if he tries using the skills he has learned so far, he would only end up being countered and knocked out. A direct confrontation will only result in his defeat, so Hobin employs a new tactic called "Never let them know your next move." He tells Tae-hun that he can have the channel, but neither Tae-hun nor the others can believe Hobin would just give up the channel like that. However, Hobin already thought about this carefully, and since Tae-hun thrives off crushing people's egos and making them agonize while they give up what they love, the only way to escape was to give him what he wanted. A while later, Hobin takes Snapper to the hospital, where he is admitted because Tae-hun gave him a broken rib. He knows Snapper must be mad at him for taking the easy way out, but if he hadn't given Tae-hun what he wanted, then one broken rib would have been the least of Snapper's worries. Snapper doesn't deny that Hobin did it for his sake, but he is still frustrated because he was willing to let himself get beat up if it meant they got to keep their channel. He tells Hobin that when he saw him go up against Paco with no fear, he felt inspired because that showed him that even a weakling can make miracles happen if they are courageous enough. But now hearing him back down from a fight like this makes him question if Hobin has any pride at all. The simple answer is no. Hobin cares about a lot of things, but pride isn't one of them. Having pride won't put food on the table, and it certainly wouldn't pay the hospital bills if he decided to go up against Tae-hun. Paco was just a random thug, but Tae-hun is a real pro, so Hobin is obviously scared since none of the moves he learned will be able to work on him. He isn't ashamed to admit that he can't beat Tae-hun, but he apologizes to Snapper for not being able to live up to his expectations. As Hobin is leaving, Jolie arrives to check on Snapper, and he still has a crush on her. So do you think he'd be really happy she came to see him? But although he is smiling, he asks that she leaves him alone for a bit, while making up an excuse about being really tired. As soon as she leaves, Snapper breaks down in tears because he thinks he has blown his shot at looking cool. He wanted to show off to her, but now she has seen just how much of a loser he is, and that hurts worse than losing the channel. Meanwhile, Hobin is outside, and he is currently reliving the moment of helplessness he experienced when Paco attacked him in the park in front of Bomi, and he realizes Snapper was right about pride being important, so he comes up with a plan. Later on in the arcade, a couple of kids are playing Street Fighter, but they keep losing to someone using Taekwondo tactics in the game. Unfortunately, that someone is Tae-hun, so the guys panic and think it is best if they leave right away so Tae-hun doesn't make them his next target. Just then, Hobin shows up and asks the two if they would let him use the machine next, and when they give up the spot, they are surprised to find that Hobin has defeated Tae-hun with a perfect victory in less than 3 seconds. Hobin then employs another one of his big brain tactics and calls Taekwondo useless, knowing he is going to piss Tae-hun off by saying so. His plan works perfectly as Tae-hun is really mad, and Hobin is scared out of his mind right now. But he gets up and declares that he just came here to give Tae-hun the YouTube channel he said he wanted, but not without some conditions. If Tae-hun wants the YouTube channel, then he is going to have to beat Hobin in a fight 1 month from now. Internally, Hobin is questioning every life decision that led him to do something as dumb as challenge a professional fighter to a brawl, but he goes on to say that Tae-hun can have his subscribers and friends too if he wins. Tae-hun laughs and grabs Hobin's shoulder to ask him why he thinks he would allow him to have prep time when he has read the Batman comics, and he could probably force Hobin to hand over the account right now, but Hobin counters with the ultimate provocation. Are you scared or something? It works flawlessly, and Tae-hun agrees to fight him in a month, but he was violent about it, so Hobin would be lying if he said he didn't piss his pants a little just now. After that, he returns to the hospital to tell the others about what he just did, and Lee is angry because now she has to worry about Hobin's health as well. Snapper holds her back, but he wonders why Hobin would do something like that after he said he doesn't want to fight so that he doesn't get hurt. The conversation he had with Snapper earlier made him realize that upholding his honor is worth it after all, so he turns to leave since he needs to begin practicing as soon as possible. Hoban heads home and immediately starts watching another one of Sandbag's videos to learn how to defeat a Taekwondo fighter, and the first lesson has him hanging from extension cables to build strength. Hoban has faith that this will work since Sandbag has helped him win a fight once before, so this should be no different. Earlier, when he first started watching the video, Sandbag plainly said that it was impossible for a regular person to ever hope to defeat a Taekwondo pro in a fight, especially with their powerful back kicks, but that's only if we're talking about a sanctioned match here. However, the story is different if it's a street fight, since all you need to do is make it impossible for them to use their kicks. Taekwondo's kicks are devastating, but they become almost useless if the fighter is on the slippery surface, so Hoban just needs to control the environment of the fight. He comes up with the perfect idea and decides he will fight Tahan on a rainy day to make sure the ground is slippery, and now that he has the location advantage set, his combat training begins. First, Sandbag instructs him to brush up on the skills he has learnt so far, the calf kick and overhand hook. These moves are much more compact than Taekwondo kicks, so they should still be useful to Hoban. He also goes back to his stamina and endurance training to make sure he is in perfect physical condition for the fight. But even with everything he has done so far, according to Sandbag, his chances of winning are still only at 5%. Beating a professional fighter is going to take more than just an environmental advantage, but Sandbag knows how to raise that percentage to 40, and that's by learning a new move. Tackling. Tackling is a move that all fighters who primarily use kicks hate, so it is something that Hoban must practice extensively. However, he is still too shy to go to a gym, so he is training in the public bath again. Learning to tackle relies heavily on your core strength, so Hoban is going to need to train hard for the next month. A couple of days go by and the others show up at his house looking for him, but even though the front door is open, they can't find any signs of him in the house at all. They walk through the apartment and they hear a strange sound coming from the closet, so they open it only to find Hoban hanging from a bar. Snapper was startled, so he asks Hoban what he was doing in there. Hoban answers that he's trying to build his core muscles, but Snapper still thinks he could have done this at a park or something. Hoban eventually runs out of energy and collapses on the floor, so he finally asks what Snapper and Lee are doing here. Snapper says they came to stream Hoban's workout since they can't do nothing with the channel for a month. While looking around, Lee notices a trash bag with an extension cord wrapped around it, so she asks Hoban what he's using it for. And just as he is about to explain, an alarm goes off, so he rises like a zombie and immediately goes back to training his abs. Snapper thinks it is stupid to work on something like abs when it won't help him beat Taehan, but while that may be true, Lee explains that Taehan's back kicks can be a game changer even if they don't connect fully, so the only surefire way to mitigate the damage is to build up a body that can survive getting kicked a couple of times. And to help with his training, Lee takes it upon herself to kick Hoban in the gut repeatedly to help him get used to the pain, and Snapper is really jealous that she isn't doing that to him instead. And now that the day has finally arrived, Hoban is a little nervous, but he is still confident in his ability to beat Taehan because of all the preparations he has made. He chose an alleyway near his house for the fight, and while it's not narrow enough to stop Taehan from using his kicks, Hoban is fine with it since the weather forecast says it'll be pouring rain today. And in the rain, Taehan won't be able to use his kicks anymore, which is the cornerstone of Hoban's plan, but there's one problem: the sky is clearly not showing any signs of rain. Snapper shows up and mentions how the news had been really wrong about all the weather forecast for the last 2 weeks, so today is actually going to be really sunny. Snapper is glad because rain always messes with his filming equipment, but he is still curious to finally hear what Hoban's master plan is to win against Taehan. Hoban looks pale as a ghost since Sandbag made it very clear that if you aren't able to make the environment restrict their kicks, then there is no hope of beating a professional fighter at all. And since it's not going to rain, then there's no point in fighting in the alleyway anymore, so he starts having a vision of what it will be like when he loses, and he can't bear the thought of going back to being such a loser, so he runs off. Taehan was watching the stream and he found it amusing to watch Hoban look so panicked before their fight. He is really confident in his ability to win this fight, so he's already thinking about all the stuff he's going to buy when he gets the new 2 channel. However, it turns out that Hoban wasn't actually running away in fear to begin with. He actually ran straight to the bathroom Taehan was in and splashes him with water to get him worked up. Since it wasn't going to rain today, Hoban had to get a little creative, so he sprayed water all over the bathroom floor to make it slippery and fulfill the conditions necessary to stop Taehan from kicking. And now that his kicks are limited, Hoban runs in to try and tackle him, but he made a fatal error in thinking that Taehan had nothing else in his arsenal. Hoban gets punched because before Taehan went into Taekwondo, he was also a professional MMA fighter, but he didn't know about Taehan's history, so he made no plans for a fist fight. Taehyun is disappointed that Hobin's plan was so lame, and Snapper is really hoping there was more to it than just pouring water on the ground to make it harder for Taehyun to kick. Taehyun starts smacking Hobin around and asks what he's going to do now that his plan has fallen through, so even though Hobin is in a lot of pain and really wants to give up, he plants his feet and delivers a calf kick to Taehyun. Luckily, Hobin made really good use of his prep time and got himself a pair of non-slip shoes, and these shoes are specially made to allow him to keep his footing even on slippery surfaces. So while Taehyun won't be able to kick, Hobin is free to use his calf kick as many times as he wants. This will be his lifeline in the fight, and most importantly, it will allow him to last long enough so they can start putting ads in the video. However, with this new imbalance introduced to the fight, Taehyun just calmly takes off his watch and continues throwing hands at Hobin regardless. Hobin is barely able to dodge the first punch, and he can't believe that Taehyun is still able to move around so quickly, despite being on a wet surface. It's not like he thought ahead to bring water shoes, so it makes no sense that he isn't slipping around. With Paco, Hobin was able to keep his distance and strike when a chance presented itself, but Taehyun is predicting all of his moves, so he's never going to last in a fight like this. He now realizes just how important footwork is in a fight, as Taehyun may look like he is slipping, but with the amount of control he has with his feet, he is using all the sliding of his advantage to close in on Hobin even faster. There's no way he can escape now, but he doesn't care because he never planned on running in the first place. He trained really hard as well, and he is going to put the fruits of his labor to the test as he delivers another calf kick to Taehyun. The kicks do seem to be getting to him, but Taehyun's punches are way too fast for Hobin to even attempt to face them head-on, so Hobin is slowly running out of stamina from all the damage he is taking. Still, a head-on clash is the only thing he can do right now, so he goes for another calf kick, knowing full well that Taehyun will be able to respond to him with a punch at the same time. The fight is a lot more even than Snapper had expected, and it's making for really good footage as well, but at this rate, Hobin is bound to get knocked out by Taehyun sooner or later. Also, he keeps shouting calf kick right before he does it, so there's no element of surprise in his attacks, but then again, Snapper also realizes that Hobin did the same thing against Paco to make him expect the calf kick and turn the tables with a punch. And that's exactly what Hobin was going for here as well, as he winds up for another calf kick, but at the last second, he switches it out for a tackle. After all the training Hobin did to perfect his tackle, he still lacked confidence in his ability to pull it off. However, Sambak had something in his video to reassure him. If he tried and failed a tackle before, then the problem was that he sucked at tackling in the first place. No tackle is going to work unless you perform it properly, and that means you need to pull your opponent by the back of the knee with all your strength. And since Hobin knows how to do this, he successfully takes Taehyun to the ground. Things are finally turning around in Hobin's favor, but Snapper still feels like something's going to go wrong since things never work out perfectly for Hobin. Now that he's on top of Taehyun, his chances of winning are officially at 50%, but there's still something he has to be careful of. Sambak had warned not to get too hasty and throw a straight punch at his opponent because a professional will know how to counter that. So instead, Hobin grabs Taehyun by the back of his shirt and presses down on top of him with his hands crossed over his neck. He has built up the necessary strength for this over the course of his abs training, so this has to work for him. The chokehold puts pressure on the carotid arteries, so it should only take 10 seconds to knock someone out with it. But as the time passes, Taehyun seems to still be oddly not unconscious for some reason, and he even has the time to point out that Hobin failed to execute the choke properly since his legs are off to the side. Hobin got impatient, and now he's paying for it. Sambak had warned that when you are the fighter with less experience, then you need to focus even more on maintaining your composure so that he doesn't miss crucial steps in his attacks, and Hobin knows just how stupid he was for failing to remember that after all the time he spent training. And as Taehyun throws Hobin into the toilet, he admits that he is impressed with the combo he just pulled off, even if he did mess it up in the end. And worse yet, Hobin wasn't actually even winning in the first place because Taehyun let him perform the tackle on purpose. Taehyun stands over Hobin, and with a huge grin on his face, he shows him exactly why he allowed the tackle, as he was to swipe Hobin's fancy shoes because of it. Hobin has no idea when Taehyun managed to take his shoes, and even worse, if he was able to take a tackle just to steal his water shoes, then that means Hobin hasn't been doing any significant damage this entire time. There was one last piece of cautionary advice from Sambak regarding what to do if the entire plan goes to shit. And seeing as the plan has gone down the drain and Taehyun is now the one with the non-slip shoes, the only thing he can advise Hobin to do is run. Over in a cafe, Munsong and Bomi are together, and Munsong is busy watching Hobin's fight on his phone. However, Bomi refuses to watch since she is still really mad at Hobin for ghosting her. Munsong can understand why she's so angry since Hobin hasn't returned any of her calls since the previous day, but she insists that she just doesn't want to talk about Hobin at all. Munsong continues to talk about Hoban and brings up how he is fighting a professional this time, but Bomi still acts like she doesn't care. Yet as soon as Munsong mentions that it looks like Hoban is winning, she eagerly starts watching the fight as well. She asks if Hoban just won the fight, but from the video, he can tell that Hoban messed up the choke, and since that would have basically been his only chance to win, he knows what's going to happen next. He turns off the phone so that Bomi doesn't see Hoban get violated again, and we go back to Hoban as he is still in utter shock. If Tahan really just let him perform the tackle and cross-choke, then that means there is nothing he can do at this point. 1 month of his hard work has been completely wasted, so he apologizes to all the viewers for letting them down. He had given up, but then Snapper reminds him about all the ad revenue he'll be missing out on if he quits now, and the money gives him all the motivation he needs. He gets back up and starts brainstorming ways to consolidate for the disadvantage he has been placed at. Even though he has lost one of his non-slip shoes to Tahan, Taekwondo fighters are only able to unleash the full power of their kicks when they are able to use both feet. According to what he learned about Tahan, his dominant foot is his right one, but he only managed to swipe the right shoe, so he'll only be able to kick with his weaker left foot. He plans to take advantage of this to properly execute the tackle and choke, but then he gets a foot stuck in his face, which makes it clear how hard it is going to be to actually reach Tahan. He gets kicked in the stomach, and his mind starts going blank as he can't breathe anymore. He is struggling to think of what to do next, so he just blindly tries to go for another attack. However, this just leads to him getting kicked over and over again. He can't dodge or predict any of the kicks either, since Taehan is able to strike from all angles, and to really add insult to injury, Taehan specifically targets Hoban's dominant foot with his last kick. Snapper is begging Taehan to stop at this point because he doesn't want to see Hoban get hurt anymore, but it's not like Taehan is going to listen to him. So he performs his most powerful move and hits Hoban with a back kick straight to the gut. Hoban is sent flying, crashing against the wall, and it looks like he has been knocked out, so Taehan walks up to him to rub it in his face. He pokes Hoban in the stomach and tells him he is lucky that he used his left leg for that kick, because he could have died if it was the right leg. But even with a weaker foot, he's pretty sure he still cracked a rub or two in Hoban's body. He then gets up and walks over to Snapper, since his victory means he now owns Hoban's channel. And since he doesn't know anything about running a channel, he asks Snapper what they need to do first to start making money. However, Snapper seems distracted by something, so Taehan turns around to find Hoban back on his feet. Back kicks are dangerous even if they aren't at full power, which is why he did all that ab training to make sure he could withstand it. And even though he can barely stand, he is ready for round 2 with Taehan, and he has a new strategy to use the environment to his favor. Snapper pleads Hoban to just quit already, since YouTube money isn't worth dying over, but for Hoban, this was never really about the money. Taehan beat up Snapper in front of his crush, and as his friend, Hoban can't just let that slide. Taehan questions if Hoban really thinks that standing in a stall will allow him to win the fight, and honestly, he does believe it. Taehan can respect the confidence he has in the bathroom stall's integrity, but he is going to prove him wrong and prepares to deliver another back kick. However, he is shocked when he realizes that Hoban was one step ahead and really uses the stall to his advantage by swinging. This way, he avoids Taehan's back kick and simultaneously lands on him, pulling off an impromptu takedown. And this time, he's not messing it up. He grabs Taehan by his collar and lifts him over his shoulder to perform a perfect baseball choke. Taehan made this bet thinking Hoban was less than human and could never hope to beat him in a fight. However, that same Hoban is currently choking him out, and there's nothing he can do about it. It's the same feeling he had when he tasted his first defeat in professional combat, and just like he did then, he begins tapping out because he knows he has lost. Tapping out is the most humiliating thing a fighter can do, because it's the same as admitting to the world that your opponent is better than you. Snapper sees Taehan tapping, and he immediately runs over to Hoban to congratulate him on winning, but Hoban's not letting go. So far, Taehan has beaten up Snapper, insulted Hoban, and raised the premiums on his health insurance with the beating he gave Hoban. So do you think Hoban gives a fuck if Taehan is tapping out? Despite Snapper telling him that he has done enough, with all the adrenaline that's pumping through his veins, the only voice he can is the voice of Samdak in his head, reminding him that in a street fight, the only way to make sure that you have truly won is to make sure your opponent is unconscious. So Hoban is not letting go until the life leaves Taehan's body. Once Taehan was completely knocked out, Hoban finally lets go of his lifeless body and happily declares that he has won. Meanwhile, Taehan is currently having a dream about his last loss, and it was the moment he realized that there are still people in the world that are stronger than him. But what he really couldn't understand was that the fighter who took him out extended a helping hand to him after his victory, when he could have just mocked him. Taehan then wakes up to find what looks like Hoban and Snapper acting sus. But they are only in this position because Hoban doesn't feel right about leaving an unconscious dude in the bathroom with his head right next to the toilets. Taehyun grabs Hobin by the neck in anger, but Hobin explains that he was just worried about Taehyun. He also wanted to make sure he got his watch back since it looked really important to him. And that act of kindness makes Taehyun reconsider his actions, so he pushes Hobin aside and says he won't bother him anymore for his YouTube channel, but he doesn't want to see him ever again. Hobin and Snapper both agree to never go near Taehyun again, but now that that's all over with, it's time for a well-placed ad. Once that's done, Hobin and Snapper celebrate, and the next step is left in the hands of Lee, who now edits the entire thing to make it as entertaining as possible. And with her help, the video easily hits 3 million views almost instantly. But all this fame is going to attract a lot of new challengers, so Hobin is going to have to watch his back from now on. Back at the burger place, Bomi still works there as a cashier and is crouched behind the counter, watching Hobin's video, but then she hears a customer approach the counter, so she gets up to greet them. However, as she gives the usual greeting, the only thing the big dude says is that he thinks Bomi is cute. The dude has no eyes, so when he asks Bomi for her number, she immediately refuses to avoid any not safe for work interactions. To get him out the door as quickly as possible, she finishes up his order of 30 Big Macs, 30 side orders of fries, and a Diet Coke because he's watching his calories. But even after getting his food, he keeps asking Bomi for her number, and she's forced to keep refusing until he finally gets the message and leaves. The other workers complain to one another that they already told that guy that he isn't welcome here anymore, yet he keeps showing up all the time. Meanwhile, Bomi thinks to herself how back when Paco was the one bothering her, Hobin used to help her out a lot, but now she feels as though she abandoned Hobin since she left him alone after he got humiliated. A while later, we head over to a meat market where a couple of butchers have just accidentally dropped their stock of pork, and now it's just lying on the ground. The only way they can get it back up in time for the 5-second rule is if they pick it up, but these things weigh like 200 kilograms each, so there's no way either of them will be able to do it. Just then, the big guy from earlier hands his bag of burgers over to one of the men and then proceeds to lift that whole slab of meat onto his shoulders, all while still trying to figure out a way to get Bomi to like him. He then proceeds to walk away like nothing happened. Other workers are amazed, but Mangi Wong is pretty famous around here since he is a professional wrestler, and the strength he possesses is out of this world. However, his wrestling career is the last thing on Mangi's mind as he is currently watching Hobin's recent video, and he is honestly shocked that Taehyun was defeated by an absolute nobody. But that gets him thinking, if he manages to beat Hobin in a fight, then it may bring more popularity to his own YouTube channel. And if he becomes famous, or at least gets more than 7 subscribers, then maybe Bomi will like him. Over at school, Hobin and Snapper are watching their view count skyrocket, and it's largely due to all the work Lee put in to make it as entertaining as possible. They are both really glad they chose to hire her, but on a different note, Snapper asks Hobin if he is really alright. Hobin doesn't know why Snapper would ask him a question like that all of a sudden, but it's because after Snapper got hit with a back kick from Taehyun, he got hospitalized, but Hobin got a back kick as well, and he seems to be perfectly fine regardless. That could be due to the fact that Snapper is just weak, but there has been something bugging Hobin about the whole encounter with Taehyun. Hobin knows exactly what malicious bullying feels like since he has experienced it for most of his life, but Taehyun seemed to be different from the others, so Hobin isn't sure he's really such a bad guy after all. Snapper isn't a fan of Hobin's overly forgiving attitude, and it's strange to see Hobin worrying about a guy who he absolutely hated a couple of days ago, but Hobin still wants to know how Taehyun is doing now that he lost the fight. Snapper informs Hobin that the whole internet has been clamoring over how hot Taehyun looked when he was knocked out, and he got so much publicity over it that he would be guaranteed to hit 200k subscribers instantly if he ever started a new YouTube channel. But for now, he's not aware of his fame, and is just sticking to his arcade games for now. After hearing the news about Taehyun, Hobin retracts every nice thing he just said about him and now firmly believes that Taehyun is a piece of shit, as all naturally hot people are his enemies. Elsewhere in the school, Lee is sitting at her desk and working on some ways to improve her chances of making friends, including learning how to stop speaking like an old man. But she is interrupted when a toy snake comes crashing down onto her desk, and she is so scared that she flies back in her chair and screams, jumping jeepers. The people who played this prank on her found it hilarious, and they even filmed it all for their YouTube channel. Although, even though they thought it was funny, they didn't think Lee screaming in terror is the kind of thing that will get them a lot of views on YouTube. Lee can't believe the audacity of these whippersnappers. First they jump scare and record her, and now they are calling her unfunny. She tells them it's rude to film someone without permission, so she wants that video deleted, and while the group doesn't care about her opinion at all, they also don't think the video is worth keeping, so they agree to delete it anyway. But one of the guys still pushes Lee to the ground for being annoying. The girls jokingly warn the guy that Hoban might come running in to save Lee at any moment, while also mocking Hoban and saying his fighting techniques would never work in a real fight. And while Lee can handle getting bullied on her own, she won't stand for anyone slandering her precious Hoban, so she throws a punch. But ironically, the guy uses one of Hoban's techniques to counter, causing Lee to hurt her hand. The girls then continue to pick on her and say that she should give up on the cute act already and just learn to speak the language normally, but Lee already tried relearning. Lee ends up crying and the girls don't like it because now they feel like the bad guys. Just then, Snapper walks into the room to save the day, or he at least tries to, but he still wouldn't be able to handle a toddler in a fight. Lee runs over to check on Snapper, and Snapper feels so ashamed that he wishes he could crawl into a hole to hide his face. Lee's bullies don't even know who Snapper is to begin with, but it doesn't really matter since they plan to take it out on Lee anyway. However, before Lee can be hit, Hoban somehow appears in the classroom and catches the guy's hand. The guy recognizes Hoban, but he didn't realize he would be so short. And Hoban didn't realize all the kids nowadays have gotten so big, but they are totally underestimating him. The guy asks Hoban if he wants to fight, and the others start asking if he staged the fight against Tahan since there's no way he could have really beaten him. Hoban is getting annoyed that they would claim his videos are staged after all the hard work he did to win, but compared to Tahan, these guys are nothing, so Hoban could probably beat them up if he really wanted to. He tries to act intimidating and threaten them the same way Tahan does. But when he menacingly asks them for 100 yen, they just give it to him and start laughing. That kind of threat only works when you got the guts to beat someone up over money, so the guy is about to throw a punch at Hoban. Hoban gets ready for a fight that he'll probably win, but before things can get started, the guy realizes that Munsong is standing behind Hoban, and the guy feels way more threatened now, so he backs off. A while later, the three are sitting outside and Hoban is talking about how he wishes he had just asked Munsong to tag along from the start since it would have saved him a lot of trouble. Munsong beat up Paco the last time he caught him bullying Hoban, but he left the juniors alone after they backed off, although Lee is glad that it didn't end up turning into a brawl. Snapper then asks Lee if she's alright after what just happened, but more than anything, she's just annoyed that those guys keep bullying people and pretending to be cool. By the way, Snapper heard something about those guys having a YouTube channel as well, so he asks what kind of content they usually make. Lee informs him that those guys call themselves the Comedy Crew and go around messing with people while saying it's just a prank, bro. And what makes it frustrating is that they are actually pretty popular despite their shitty attitudes. On that note, Snapper gets up and starts yelling at Hoban for not doing anything to defend Lee's honor. Hoban counters, saying that Snapper did even worse than him. Meanwhile, Lee is still angry over those guys, mocking the techniques that Hoban learned to use. Back to Hoban, and Snapper's argument has gotten pretty heated, and Hoban says he was annoyed at those kids as well, because they hurt Lee, but mostly because they made fun of his fighting techniques. Hoban then goes over to Lee and apologizes for not being able to help much back there, but he promises to teach her how to defend herself the next chance he gets. And for how she's looking at Hoban, Lee has definitely been rizzed up. Later that night, Hoban is sleeping in his room and having a dream about the encounter he had with Munsong today. After Munsong saved him from having to fight his juniors, Hoban was really grateful to him. But Munsong has something serious to tell Hoban, so he bluntly says that Hoban needs to give Bomi a call. He knows Hoban feels ashamed of himself, so it is hard for him to face her, but Bowman also doesn't deserve to get ghosted like this. Hoban agrees to call her, but it's easier said than done since he doesn't know how he'll talk to her after she saw him in such a disgraceful state. Meanwhile, Lee is also in her room, and she's absolutely head over heels for Hoban after what happened today. She can't hold her excitement in and immediately texts Hoban just to hear from him. Hoban has no idea she's in love with him though, so he just responds like he normally would. However, Lee has plans to make sure Hoban knows exactly how she feels. The next day, Bomi is back at work again and Hwang is there again, but at least he's got eyes this time, so he's not a anime protagonist. Although he's still very creepy, so Bomi is worried about what might happen when she gets off work later tonight. While she's still thinking to herself, she hears a familiar voice speak to her from across the counter, so she looks up and finds Hoban standing there. Hoban tries to play things cool by talking to Bomi, but she's clearly mad at him. Hoban can understand why she would be angry at him since he did avoid her for 2 whole months, so maybe he's being too selfish by contacting her after all this time. He thinks it would be best if he just leaves before he ends up causing a scene, but as he is walking away, Bomi notices that Hoban wrote a bunch of notes on his hand about what to say when he meets her, and she finds it really funny, so she laughs a little. But then she remembers that she's supposed to be mad at Hoban, so she tries to play it off. However, Hoban already saw her laugh, so he knows for sure that she doesn't really hate him. Bomi tries acting like she's still angry and tells Hoban to leave because she's really busy, but there's literally no one else ordering, so Hoban seizes the opportunity to ask Bomi how she's been doing lately. Hobin's tactics work since Bomi is no longer trying to get rid of him, but now she asks him about the editor he hired, and even though she's smiling, Hobin is terrified by her expression. He does his best to explain everything, so he tells her everything about Lee. But then Bomi asks him if he thinks Lee is cute. Everyone knows this is a trap. Hobin hesitates to answer, but then things get a lot more complicated for him as Lee shows up looking for Hobin and she overheard the question. So she directly asks him if he thinks she is cute. Since Lee asked him the question, Hobin is easily able to tell her that she's cute, but Lee wasn't ready to hear that from him, so she gets a little flustered. She texted him earlier to ask where he was, so Hobin asks if she came all the way here just to see him. She makes up an excuse about wanting his opinion on a song she wrote, but then she throws a punch at Hobin, which he counters with his forehead. Now that Bomi has seen Lee in person, she can see that it's an undeniable fact that Lee is cute, but in a surprising turn of events, Lee isn't here to try and steal Hobin from Bomi. She's actually here to help Hobin reconcile with her. She hands Bomi a gift and tells her all about how Hobin can't stop talking about her, much to Hobin's embarrassment, but he can't deny that most of it is true. After hearing how Hobin feels, Bomi quietly tells him that he can text her again, and all Hobin's embarrassment immediately fades away as he realizes that Bomi has forgiven him. Although Bomi is still trying to act like she doesn't care. Seeing this, Lee decides to leave and uses a fake toe injury as an excuse so that Hobin won't question it. But as she walked home that night, even though she knows Hobin is in love with Bomi, she can't help but get flustered again when she remembers how Hobin called her cute. The next day, Bomi is walking down the street, and she's way happier than before since she has been texting Hobin all night, but then her good mood is ruined when she gets startled by a fake snake in her bag. Bomi stumbles back and falls over into the street, and the bullies from earlier, who call themselves the comedy crew, pop out of nowhere to tell her it's just a prank, bro. They start asking her if they can upload the video of her to their channel. But Bomi is still confused by everything that just happened, so much so that she doesn't realize she is in the middle of the street until a car comes speeding towards her. This was the end of episode 9. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to not miss the next part.